This video is about formatting with LaTeX. It corresponds to section 7.8 of the Applied Analog Electronics textbook. Now, it is not a full tutorial on how to use LaTeX. In fact, all I'm going to do here is to go over a particular template that I have provided. If you want to really learn to use LaTeX, you'll need to find other documentation, either in print or on the web. A number of people who have taken this course in the past have found the documentation that comes with Overleaf to be useful. The template that I provide is on Overleaf, so that's a natural place to start. Overleaf is just an installation of LaTeX on the web with a shared document editor so that you can have multiple people editing the same source. There's no need to use Overleaf. You can install LaTeX on your own machine and run everything, usually a good deal faster, on your own machine. But then it's hard to do shared editing. So a lot of students have found that the shared editing of Overleaf is worth the trouble. Now, the template that I provided here isn't technically a template, because then I would have had to pay Overleaf, I don't know, $150 a year or something in order to make it a template. It's a project. It's a publicly available project. If you want to use it, you can't edit it, but if you go to the menu, click on the menu option up here, you get a sidebar here that says Copy Project. If you copy the project, then you'll have it in your own space, and you can edit that copy as much as you want. Okay, I'm not going to bother making a copy here because I'm not going to be doing any editing today. What I'm going to do is go over a little bit what the structure of the LaTeX file is and what things I expect people to change and what things should be left alone. The first thing up here, document class 11-point article. That is basically saying what style file is going to be used, and I'm recommending the article style file because that's an appropriate one for things like design reports. If you wanted to make something that's much more padded, there are several other style files available. There's book style files and report style files and all kinds of stuff. The article style file is a good one to start with. It doesn't produce a lot of blank space that doesn't do anything for you. I have got a big preamble here from the document class until you go all the way down to begin document. Everything between those two lines is what's known as the preamble. And this preamble contains all kinds of definitions and settings that control the way LaTeX works. So let's go back to the top and take a look at some of these settings. First of all, there's some use package commands, and these pull in additional commands into LaTeX that have been defined in the packages. The first one here, input encoding, says accept UTF-8 files, and that means that you can use all of the Unicode characters when you type things. It's a little bit handy because you may accidentally type something that you don't intend, and you don't want that to crash the system. You would like it to handle it as gracefully as it can. The geometry one basically says things like what's your paper size and what's your margins. And I've set this as default letter paper and margin equals 1 inch, which is a reasonable margin all the way around. There's a lot of options to the geometry package, and you can find all the documentation for the packages by just Googling LaTeX package geometry or LaTeX package input enc, and it'll find the appropriate package, and you can find other options. Okay, the next package I have here is GraphicX, and that's the one I use for including graphics. And you're going to be including a lot of graphics in your reports because you've got block diagrams and schematics, you may have photos, so you're going to need to have some sort of graphics package, and GraphicX is a perfectly good one. The next one I have here is the place ints package, and this is kind of an unusual one. Not a lot of people use it, but it's very useful for making sure that your figures, if you have a lot of them, don't cross section boundaries. And so by saying use package, section, above, below, place ints, it prevents graphics from being drifting into the next section or the section after that. So it keeps sections from starting until all the graphics from the previous section have cleared. And again, it's a handy thing to have if you've got a lot of figures in fairly short sections, which a lot of you will have. The next package, Fancy Verb, is for verbatim, and it allows including script files with numbering and some other fancy formatting if you want. And in fact, this next thing is setting up how the verbatim text is going to be done. It says put numbers on the left, use footnote size for fonts, so it's pretty small font, obey tabs, frame is single. There's a bunch of options here for how verbatim text is going to get set. And this is a reasonable way to do it. Now, some people don't like the verbatim as a way of doing script files. They prefer the listings package for doing that. And it does different sets of things. It'll do syntax highlighting and stuff if you like that. So you have sort of choice of how you're going to do things that are supposed to be either verbatim or program listings of some sort. Okay. Then I've done some adjustment to some parameters here. The widow penalty and the club penalty, I've made them large so that widow lines and orphan lines, that's single lines at the beginning and end of a page, are penalized pretty heavily, and it says, I'd rather stretch the page and move this onto the next page, or squeeze the page and move it onto the previous page, in order to avoid having those single line things. I also allow shorter pages if it'll prevent widow and orphan lines, so ragged bottom. And then I changed some things, because we're doing very figure-heavy stuff, I changed some things that allow figures, multiple figures, not to cause problems. Changing the top fraction, double top fraction, double float page fraction, and text fraction. Changing all these parameters changes how much text it's trying to force onto a page with a figure. And this allows, the settings here allow figures with only a tiny amount of text, or even sometimes no text on the page. Okay, the other thing is we'll be going to be using bib.latex to do our references, and here I'm saying use bib.latex as a package, and I've set a bunch of parameters here. You don't have to use these settings. These are ones that I liked for the citation style, and you can look up what they all mean, or you can just use them. You can just copy this and not care what they mean, and know that the citation style will be perfectly okay. But if you want to control the citation style because you're trying to do it for a different audience than me, and you go, well, they want this to be not numeric citations, but this other format, this is where you change those settings. And again, you can find the documentation for all that by looking for the bib.latex package documentation on the web. The next thing here, add bib resources. Now this is one you will need to play with, because this says where your bibliography file is for doing the bib.latex references. And here I have a bme51.bib, which has the stuff that I'm citing in this example, but you'll have your own bibliography file. It may have a different name. This is where you tell it the name of that file. And you can have more than one file. I believe this accepts a comma-separated list of the bibliography files that you're looking at. But they do need to be in existence if you're going to say you're going to use them as bibliography resources. Okay, then I defined some commands, some new commands, figref, tabref, seqref, and eqnref for doing references to figures, tables, sections, and equations. And the idea is that I will have labels that start with fig colon or tab colon or sec colon or eqn colon, and then this will give me the figure, an unbreakable space, and then the number that's being referred to. And this is a much better way to refer to figures than trying to manually do it. One of the nice things about LaTeX is it does automatic cross-references for you and updates them. If you insert a new table, all the tables get renumbered, but all the reference to the tables also get renumbered as long as you've done them with something like this. And here I've given you a definition that's a handy one to have. I've defined a new command, \ohm, which, if you're in math mode, is a capital omega. Otherwise, go into math mode, do the capital omega, come back out of math mode, and then end the if. So it's a handy command to use. It's what I use whenever I have to use the ohm symbol. Okay, here's some things that you need to change. Title. What's the title for your lab or your report? And it should be meaningful. Having the lab number on there is useful because then it's very easy for me to say, oh, that's lab 3. It doesn't belong in this pile. Authors, if you've got multiple authors, you might want this // between them to indicate that you're switching to a new line. And then, of course, notice that I don't have any date here, but if you look over here on the example after you've run this thing, it's got a date. That's provided automatically, and you just leave that alone. It puts the date in. That's the date that you last did this recompile here. And that's the right date for you to be putting on there. You don't want to be putting in some random date. You don't want to put in the due date. You don't want to put in some fake date from 3 days ago. Just the time that you ran this thing, that's the date that should be on here. That helps you keep track of which version you're looking at. Okay, then I get the begin document. And the first thing I do inside the begin document is make title. And what that does is it takes all the title information that I provided in the preamble and formats it according to the style file into the title block up here. Okay, then I have a section header. And the idea of LaTeX is not that you control where everything goes and place things very precisely, but that it's for an author. So the person who designed the style file designed how things go and how you do numbering and all that sort of thing. And as the author, you just have to concentrate on the content, occasionally telling LaTeX sort of what the context should be interpreted as. Like this thing says, design goal for, and then I say unbreakable space L dots. The /L dots is how you get an ellipsis character. And by putting it inside this section, I said this is a section header. Start a new section here, and this is the title of the section. And then after the section header, I say, put a label here, SEC:goal. Later on, I can refer to /secref goal, and it'll say section 1, because that's what this section is numbered. If I added a new section before this, this would become section 2, and a reference secref of goal would now be section 2. Okay, and I talked in a previous video about sort of the contents of this thing. I'm not going to go into, the contents of this now. I'm just showing you how the various commands in LaTeX produce the result. One weird thing here is the way you get an M dash in LaTeX is 3 hyphens, and that gets converted into an M dash. Now, the interesting thing is that if you've got this UTF-8 setting for the input encoding, it'll also accept an M dash character to produce an M dash. So there's 2 ways to get it then. But you can always do the 3 hyphens to get an M dash. And that's what I've got here 3 times. Okay, section. Again, section title and a label for what is the label that I'll refer to this section by in cross-references. Notice that doesn't produce anything over here. There's no this is a 2 or anything. It's just grabbing the number that it incremented when it made the new section. Okay, if you need italics, the \emph here is, say, do emphasis. And that produces italics, which you can see sort of just barely over my head here. All right, that's about it for this section. Another section here. Okay, here I've got in the block section here, I've got a figref block. This is referring to a figure. Now it's a figure that hasn't come out yet. So these cross references can be either forwards or backwards. Generally, you want to put figures as close to the first reference to the figure as you can. So here, where I've referred to figref block, I'm going to expect at the end of this paragraph, or just before this paragraph, that the figure itself gets created. And here it is, begin figure, end figure, that's the figure itself. I say centering, that's center stuff horizontally. And here's where I use the graphics package. Include graphics. I gave here a width. You can also give a height instead. And here I did the width in terms of a fraction of the text width. The text width is how wide my block of text is. You can also do something like 10 cm for 10 centimeters, or you can do 2 in for 2 inches. It's got to have some sort of unit. I like backslash text width for doing width. I often do something in terms of height, like 4 cm or 5 cm. And then I have here generic block diagram. And what that's referring to is, if you notice over here on the left, let me see if I can make a little more room for that. There's a generic block diagram.pdf. So there's a PDF file out here that's got my figure in it. And I refer to it just by saying include graphics, and then in square brackets, parameters to control the width or the height, and then give the name of the PDF file. I don't have to say the .pdf because it looks for the few top file types that it understands and sees if one of them is there. PDF, incidentally, is a good way to do line graphics. Okay, and then I have a caption. Always need a caption. You cannot do a figure or table in this class without a caption, and the caption goes below the figure or table. And there's a short version of the caption here that I've got in square brackets. That is used only for the list of figures or the list of tables. And so the short version here, basically, here I've just said short version of caption, and it doesn't matter because I'm not putting in a list of figures here, so that's just ignored. But I do want to have something there in the square brackets because it has to be a single paragraph, and my long caption, the actual caption, may be multiple paragraphs. And so I always want to have a short version of the caption, even if I don't use it. Okay, then I put the label inside the caption here, and what that's going to do is pick up the figure number. Okay, and the caption itself should be a full paragraph or even multiple paragraphs. It can include things like citations and other stuff. And here I've got saying that this figure was copied from the textbook, and I'm claiming that in the textbook it was figure 6.1, and I'm citing Carplus text. And that's a reference to something, an entry in the bme51.bib file that I pointed to earlier. The caption is closed by the close brace that matches the open brace, and then the figure is ended. And let's actually take a look at this, scroll up a little bit. Here you can see the figure at the top here, and the caption right underneath it. And then I started a new section here. And in that section, I said just as secref block has a block diagram, and so that turns into just as section 3 has a block diagram. So the secref expands to the appropriate name for the section. And notice that this section has come out. If you look in the picture here, this figure 2 is above the beginning of this section, even though I haven't asked for figure 2 yet. And here's where later on I asked for figure 2, begin figure centering, and then fold the series chain. Here I did put the .pdf. It's optional. If I had left it out, it would have found it because it knows to look for PDF files. And I can have a short name and a long proper caption. So this is an important thing about figures. They float. They're not fixed in a particular place in the text. Just because I put it here in the text doesn't mean it will appear here in the text. So you can never refer to a figure as being above or below. It's always going to be referred to by number. So here, figref series chain produces figure 2. And you can see that again, sort of just a little bit over my head here. Okay, notice also on that same line that I have the figref series chain, I've got \verb plus \figref plus. And what that did was to create \figref as a verbatim quoted thing. And again, that's sort of moved my head a little bit. That was right behind where my head was. All right, are there new things here? Okay, the \verb, here I used plus signs. Later on I did it again, but here I used colons to begin and end the thing that's being quoted. You can use any character as the beginning and ending, except for letters, because then it wouldn't understand that verb had ended. But any special character there will work. The other way to do a verbatim section is begin verbatim, end verbatim as an environment. And that'll create, let me scroll up a little bit here, this sort of boxed verbatim chunk of text. If you like the listings package, here is the quoting mechanism for the listings package. You use list in line to do listings. That's the equivalent of the \verb. And begin LST listing will do the same sort of thing as the begin verbatim, end verbatim, except for it may do syntax highlighting and other fancy stuff for you. So there are two different ways of doing the same thing depending whether you want to use the fancy verb package or the listings package. If you're going to do a chunk of text that's longer than just a few lines, it's probably a good idea to include it inside a figure so you can refer to it by name and you can avoid awkward page breaks in the middle of the listing. All right, so more sections. Citation again. Notice that when I do the citation, I've got a tilde in front of it, and that's so that I have an unbreakable space before the citation, so I don't get beginning of a line starting with a citation. The citation style I'm using uses square brackets for the citation, and it's kind of awkward to have that starting at the beginning of a line, particularly if there's a page break there. So I use an unbreakable space before it, so it's always attached to the word before it. And then \print bibliography here, it says put out the bibliography. And if we take a look at what that does, it puts out an unnumbered section called references. So I didn't ever say references. That was created automatically by the print bibliography. And then it puts out the bibliography entries for the things that I actually cited, and only the things that I cited. So that's one of the nice things about LaTeX bibliography things, is that you can have a bibliography file that's got hundreds of references in all the things you've ever needed to cite, and it'll only pull out those things that you actually cited in this report. And so you won't end up with a padded reference list, which is an academic sin. Okay, if you have an appendix, which many times you will not, then you can say \appendix, and after that sections aren't going to be numbered, they're going to have letters. So section A, section B, section C are appendices. And I gave an example here of a way you can grab an entire file for a listing. And here I did it as verbatim input. Inductance underbar 220.gnuplot. That was the file that I had over here. And it just includes that entire file as if you had said, I want a verbatim printout of this. And you notice that because this one broke across page boundaries, something I said that putting in a figure would help you avoid, you've got that the box has a page break in the middle of it, which kind of tells you that the listing continues past the bottom of this page. You have to go to the next page to look at it. It tells you where it ends. And then end document is always needed at the very end of your document to match the beginning document you had after the preamble. Okay, that's the basics of this example. I've given many specific things in here. I haven't shown you the use of math mode in here, which is really where LaTeX has its strong suit. Producing typesetting math is what TeX and LaTeX are really good for, and I did not provide examples here. You'll find hundreds or thousands of examples of that on the web, and so when you need to do math, take a look on the web. Actually, it's not quite true that I didn't give any examples, because I believe I gave way back up here in the beginning, where did I define it? New command ohm, I had this thing where I had the \open paren, \omega, \close paren. That's math mode. That says, do this capital Omega in math mode. But that's the only place I did it in this example. Okay, so what you should do is make a copy of this project to your own Overleaf account and try editing it. Incidentally, a trick for getting an Overleaf account where you can share it with somebody else is to provide a reference. So what I mean is you don't just go there and sign up. If somebody provides you with a reference, they can get credit for your having signed up, and that allows them then to have two persons editing. Using their account can now be used for two people. And if you use yours and pass yours on, so recommending somebody else use it, you can get, by passing around the sort of the token of I'm recommending a new user, you can all get two users instead of just one user for your use of Overleaf. At least that worked at one point. I haven't checked to see whether Overleaf is still doing that word of mouth encouragement for people to use Overleaf. All right, I think that's enough for LaTeX for now.